Hello everyone and welcome to the next lecture where I'll be talking about graph state variables, and we will be continuing where we left off in the previous one where we talked about variable switches. So a graph state variable is very similar to a regular variable which we define down here, but the difference is they are kind of a global thing, a global variable. And for a lookdiff template, it makes sense to have a few graph state variables, one maybe for render quality, maybe one for which asset you are working on. So let's say you have 20 assets, but you don't want to have 20 Katana scenes because Katana is actually built to work in one environment, which is driven by variables and different kind of switches and all that. So the idea is to have a GSV, a graph state variable, which takes care of all that. So let's just do that actually, and you will see the benefit of this all. So if I go to project settings, if you don't have that tab, you can click on the drop down and go to project settings, click that, and then it will pop up here. And in the top here, you can see there's like a variable section and a graph state variable drop down. So let's just start by creating a new one, which we will be calling asset. So click on graph state, hit add variable, hit the wrench icon, and change the variable name. And let's just make it good enough and just call it asset for now. And this is now an empty variable which does not have a value. So right now, what do we have actually here? We have our gear coming in. So let's go back to project settings, and in this little text field, let's just type in gear and hit enter. And now you can see a few things happen. So first of all, this is now a local value, which means it's not the default anymore. And in the top here, you can see now we have orange or yellow asset is equal to gear. If I click that, I get that same drop down. Right now we just have the one, but you can see what we get here. Pretty interesting stuff. And this is on the top there. So this variable, graph state variable, is, as I said, a global one. It does not need to be in the scene graph for it to work. So what we can do with this is we can have different collections or different kind of streams for a different asset. So I was talking about asset shot work or asset work, and what I mean by this is we can actually have different material overrides within this area, and it's driven by that asset variable. So let's just create a variable switch again, and maybe rename this to VS variable switch and asset, maybe asset work area, whatever, asset work. And let's edit this and change the pattern to be this time not output as we had before, but this time the variable name is called asset, and the pattern for this would be new port, and click the wrench, rename this, and this pattern would be gear. So now we have that one thing. Let's just connect this switch up and confirm this, and let's just connect, because if we don't have the gear, it will not pass through. So let's just make sure we hook both of these guys up, and maybe to clean it up, let's create a dot in between, hook this up to the dot so we have a straight line. And then what you can do as well, we can first of all make this area a bit larger to have more room to play. Move this whole thing down like that. And now let's extend this a bit. I'm not sure, like that maybe. Move the switch down as well. And now we have lots of room to play within that asset. So if I now clean this up, create a few more dots, maybe move this one down to here, move this one over, create a dot down there, like that. All right, so let's say we have a few more assets. So if I right click, show in floating pane, I have that here. And let's say we have maybe spaceship. So I'm just creating a few more assets here, spaceship, and we have, let's just say car, and maybe one more we can do, maybe cake. So these are now my assets I have in the scene. Oh, I need to actually rename the input to cake as well, like that. All right, so all these guys, let's just connect this up to the dots on the top here, like that, and clean this up again with a few dot nodes. Move this over, one more here at the bottom, and then we can actually create one up here where this one connects to, and move this down, like that, and create one more to have a straight line here, like that. So this would be now our work area, and you can see now not much is going to happen. But if let's say we created the material on the top here, right? So we have now, if I minimize that, we have plastic, we've got metal, we've got base and all that. So let's say for our acid, which is called gear, we want to change the metal material. So I create a new material node, put it in here, and I just want to maybe edit this like that. And then obviously it needs to have a path. So I can just, I want to actually edit the material, and I want to use the metal one. I just drop in our mat metal in the location. We get our previously exposed parameters, and this is all we got to do. Let's just maybe make it a bit cleaner, call it edit metal or whatever, like that. And right now this is activated. If I go back to my project settings, right now I just have that one gear here. We would need to create these other ones as well. So I'm just editing that string, typing spaceship, hitting enter, and clicking, double clicking, typing car and enter, and then one more cake and enter. And now you can see we have in that drop down 4 different variables or different values for the acid variable. And now I can quickly change, and you can see now these streams update whenever I change the acid in the top here, like that. You can see now this is grayed out and this stream is activated. So let's say I want to have a prune in here, like that. Now you can see the prune is activated. If I move to my main gear acid, you can see now that's being changed. So that is the beauty of that. And one thing again is obviously you notice that even though I'm changing the acid itself is not changing. So we would need to create another switch for our inputs on the top here. So in this section, we would need to create another switch. So let's just do that. Obviously it needs to be a variable switch, like that. Click this in here. Maybe move all this a bit further up, and then we have our in, which goes to our baking, and then we just call this maybe VS acid in, like that. And ideally you would do the same thing, create this, but I'm just lazy. I will just copy this switch at the bottom and replace it with this one and rename this to acid in. And now you can see now we have now different acids coming in. If I move this one down, I can have maybe this is acid gear in, and right now I don't have anything for the other ones, so I will just leave them blank. So if I am switching now to the acid spaceship, you can see the stuff disappears and I get an error because I don't have a valid 3D input. So let's just create simple primitive creates in here, like that. So now you can see it's all happy again. Copy and paste, connect this up. Maybe this one will be just a basic cylinder, and we create one more, hook this up to the cake, and the cake is, what else do we have? Let's say it is a taco, like that. So if I switch my acid to the cake, you should see the taco. It's not double-sided, but we can see it. Let's switch it to car and we get the cylinder. So you can now see the benefit of having this graph state variable. You can quickly, within one scene, you can just change your assets. You can quickly work on the car, then you can switch and work on a different thing. And for your shaders, if you have your basic shaders and you did your preparing work properly and named everything accordingly, like with these variables and did these prefixes, STM or poly or no or something like that, and maybe or even add the material name like metal and all that, then all of these things which we did in previous lectures will apply to your assets. So the default ones will assign to your objects which you have tagged in modeling, and then all you got to do then, as I said, these shaders should be maybe like 60%, 70% of the final shader, and then in the asset work you can actually really dial in those values to make it really look great. So this is kind of where you would do this kind of stuff. And I was also talking about render settings, and let's just create another global variable for this, or a graph set variable, and just click the drop down, add a variable, rename it, and let's just call it what should we call it, quality maybe. Always try to keep them short and brief. And now let's just create low and create another one, high. Oops, maybe the order is not correct, and medium. I think I'm not sure if that matters. I guess not. It's just maybe the list in here is not the same way, so we can actually clear the menu options and rename this to low. And I think we need to clear them up one more time. So now we have low, and now I'm typing medium, and now high. So now these guys should be in order. Medium, well, whatever, it's not in order anyways, not a big problem. So let's just change our quality to low, and now in my render settings thing here, I can actually create different Arnold global settings. So to get some more space, let's just select these AOVs and hit G to group them, and rename this group to AOV create or something like that, and move this guy down. And so now let's just create a group, type group like that, and within that group just create a dot for now. Type in dot, drop this in, and now just connect this up to that dot node like that. So now we just have a group which is connected to our stream, and let's just call this rename this to maybe render settings, and hit Control and enter. So we are now within this group. So what we can do now depends if you want to do a variable switch or a VEG. It's totally up to you, but I don't like really nested groups, so I will be just creating another variable switch down here, and I think you understand the concept. So feel free to pause the video and just set this up for yourself. So I'm just hooking up the variable switch with my 3 inputs, and obviously my name would be quality like that, and my patterns would be low, medium, and high. If you want to have your nice port names, you obviously would need to rename the port to low, rename this to medium, and then high like that. And now we want to have different render settings for all these different values. So let's just create an AGS node and hook this up in here, and this will be AGS underscore low. And then we copy this, paste this over, hook it up with tilde, it's a lot faster. And then this is medium, copy and paste, and hook this up like that, and rename this with the enter key to high. Create one more dot here, one more here, one more maybe down low, one here, and one there. So this is very clean and straight. There we go. And obviously now you would need to type in the values which you would like. So this is up to you what you want to think is high settings. I will be just changing the AA samples for now, or maybe we can do a bit more. So let's just change the AA samples to maybe 2, and then in lighting, yeah, let's just keep all, let's move all these ones to 1, and for the depth on 1 as well. So this is my low settings. Let's go to medium, and we can actually copy the lighting ones. Right click and copy, edit medium, go to lighting, paste it, we get those values. And for medium, I want to have 2 depth values and maybe AA samples to 4. And this would be high settings, where we will be having maybe 8. And then we have lighting samples at 2. Let's just make them local. And the thing is, if you have them on local, whenever you have an AGS on the top, it will not change these values. So all like how the stream goes from top to the bottom, all the child nodes or downstream nodes inherit those values. So if I have lighting samples, or let's say ray depth at 5 for the top AGS node, and I go to the one which is downstream, you can see that the value has been updated, or it's supposed to be updated. Let's see if it actually does it. Because I have set it, it's now on 2 because I have a local value on this. If I click it, you can see it's not as yellow as the bottom one, but you can see we get the value. And if I actually, I think I can disable it right here. So if I disable the local assignment, I get the one which is set on the top. So if I disable the one on the top, you can see now this is the Arnold default value, which is 1. So that's kind of what local means. But I want to just delete this, and I want to have 2 depth for my medium and make sure this is a local value. For high, I definitely want at least 3 bounces, and maybe we want more SSS, maybe 4, and we want it like that. So this is the indirect transmission. So this is now my high settings. My medium is 4111, my low is 2111, and this is kind of my settings. So whenever I change my variable switch now to medium settings, you can see now medium is activated. And if I go to high, high is activated. So this is kind of the beauty of a graph state variable, or what is it called? Graph state variable, correct. So variable switch, let's just rename this to render settings. And now we have a lot cleaner. And now within this node, we don't really care about it on the top level. So all we got to do now is change my settings in that menu, and we can be sure it will render like we expect it to. So we can do a test quickly. If I just isolate this and I let's say I render the sun environment from that variable set and hit preview render, we should see our sun gaffer being rendered in that environment with the settings. What is in here? A prune, it's all of this is empty. So this is now my low settings for the sun. So if I change it to be medium, we should see better quality. I restarted the render with Control and backslash. And let's see now if the samples look a lot nicer. So if I go previous frame is keyboard key up and down. So I go down, you can see a lot more noise. If I go up, this is currently the medium settings. And if I change to high and render, let's see if that works as well. Takes a bit to translate. It's a very simple scene though, but this is kind of what we got. So it's cooking, there we go. We see our buckets loading up. Render, render, render. High settings are high, but we get a clean render. So this is now with medium, high, medium, and low settings. And this is just by changing the values on the top. So let's go back to low, and let's just change our asset to be maybe, instead of gear, let's just try the spaceship, or actually let's just try the car, which is a cylinder. Control backslash and see if it actually changes our asset. And it does. So it works as expected. The default assignment, if nothing is set up correctly, it will always get the base shader applied. So you can see now how powerful these graph state variables are and how flexible you can work with this. It's very convenient and very helpful. And one last thing which I want to do is in our look file bake, right now we are forcing the name to be gear, and we actually want this to be automated. It might be a bit more complicated, but it will need to be an expression, and it will be a Python one, and it will take into consideration our graph state variable. So if I just copy this And I right click Save To and go to Expressions. We did that before, so it shouldn't be too complicated. So the first thing what we want to do is replace that gear with our asset name. And how would we do that? The interesting thing is we would need to do a bit of string interpolation to get everything working as expected. So the first thing is we would need to get the project location, and how we do that is by just typing project.dir. And now you can see we already get that whole string replaced. And all we want to do now is type plus under quotes, and ideally we have maybe look file as a name and underscore, and then we would have asset name like that .klf, and we need a slash as well. So what we would need to do is type in a / here, and this would now autocomplete the path. So what we want to do in Python, there is a module called path, and it has a function join, which joins two paths together. So that's very straightforward actually. So what we do is we just type path.join, and now we provide two paths here. So project.dir is one, project.dir, and then the next thing would be the look file as underscore asset.klf. And now you can see it automatically appends the backslash. The other ones are / though. So what you can do to make sure it will work even if it's on Mac or on Linux or Windows, you can type in path.normalize the path and just use the project there for that and hit Control and Enter. And now you can see everything is normalized to backslashes, and this is the default Windows behavior. Katana has /, so it doesn't really matter. This should work as expected. And what we want to do now is we want to replace our asset with our value. So now you can do typical string replacements. We just want to swap the asset out. So I'm just selecting this, and I'm just typing the curly brackets, which is a Python string replacement. And I will type .format regular brackets, and whatever is in here will get replaced. So if I type in asset name, Control and Enter, you can see now my asset name is in here. If I type in vehicle, you can see vehicle gets replaced. So all we got to do now is find a way to query this variable, which is currently set. And how we do that is also, if you know it, very straightforward. You type in project, you type variables, which is all the variables, and then we say we want to query the asset one, and we want to get its value. Control and Enter, and now you can see that gear is automatically filled in. If I change the asset to be spaceship, you can see now it automatically changes to spaceship. So whenever you change the asset in the top, you can already be safe. If you run write look file, you write out the correct asset. The only thing is the gear is on the top here, so we need to find a way to always make sure that we have the correct location. The problem though is it's hard to always know if your input location, like your asset, always has the same naming. So this is something you would need to keep in mind, and that's why I did not use an expression for this. So because right now the primitive doesn't have it, obviously. If I move back to my gear, you know the gear has it because we created it that way. The problem is if you don't do it properly, an expression here will not make sense. It does not find that location if you didn't do it right. So that's why I kept this, the root location manual. So you would still need to say, okay, I want now this location to be written to, select that, adopt scene graph location, and then it's a different path, and then you can hit the look file or bake look file. So this, I would not recommend to automate this because unless you are sure you always export the correct paths, you can do it. Otherwise, I will not recommend you to do that. So now, by now you should be able to understand what variables are and what graph state variables are. So one is a global one and the other one is a local one which lives within the stream. So we have created variables for our gaffers. And we have created also variables for our asset work, which is reading the graph state variable. And these ones here are actually reading the scene graph variables, which are within this guy here. So these are reading, let's just actually rename them VS, I think Gaffer can just call this. And these will now be switching based on our inputs at the bottom here. So we can actually for now just delete these two guys just to clean up our scene graph. So if we render from here to disk, we will actually render the correct Gaffer for that location. If I view from here, the garage Gaffer is being rendered, and whatever I do in here is happening as well. And then if I want to back this out, I can go in here, and the output file name is always tied to my scene location plus the look file and the asset name, which is in this case gear, and you would need to choose your location from right there. So I hope this kind of makes sense, and if it does not, feel free to ask any questions below. And obviously with this information you can definitely extend your templates. You can use maybe object properties for your stacks, different object properties. If you want to have different things in here for different assets, you can do a variable group or a switch and have custom ones per asset. So again, thank you guys for watching this lecture, and let me know any questions in the section for this, and I will see you in the next one.